He died as soon as he began to speak. Soon after, the CIA took his research, and years later revealed only fragments. But what I found is far more rare. His wife preserved the original notes, releasing them in a material almost no one has ever seen. In the 1970s, fragments of Itzhak Bentov's research began surfacing in declassified CIA files. What the public saw were only broken pieces, mysterious, incomplete. Shortly after he began sharing his discoveries, Bentov died in what many still call a strange accident. Some believe his work was quietly taken, copied, and buried. But decades later, hidden deep and almost forgotten, I found a rare material his wife released, an attempt to finish the work he started. Work that, if true, could have changed the way we see reality itself.
Here is our reality, and here is the other reality, which we now have expanded. And we can be conscious on that level simultaneously with this level, so that we can actually have the benefit of both. And we can explore that reality and bring back the information. And this is, in fact, what Ben did. And the information that I will be talking about from now on was received in those states.
And when you hear Murtala describe his work, it clicks at the instant because this wasn't mysticism scattered in the wind. It was a system, a framework, almost like Bentov had traced the hidden architecture beneath everything we call real. And seeing those blueprints, you begin to understand why intelligence agencies were paying attention. Before his tragic death in 1979, Itzhak Bentov had already begun building something extraordinary. He wasn't content with meditation as a personal practice or science as a cold experiment. So, he made a map, a framework that explained why consciousness feels bigger than the body, why humans seem to evolve beyond survival, and why reality itself sometimes behaves like an illusion. He was convinced we weren't just bodies walking around, and there's a pattern that repeats itself whether you look at the nervous system or the entire universe. And after stepping into that map, you won't see reality the same way as before.
The nervous system is the thing that is evolving, and the nervous system is supported by a skeleton of bones and muscles and tissue, etc., etc. The nervous system is that thing that gives us the picture of our realities. That is, our realities, that reality which you see all around you, the flowers and the chairs and the microphones and the teacup, is given to us by our senses. Yeah. We don't see light which is beyond UV and beyond infrared. We hear only a limited scale of vibrations, like, for instance, we hear anywhere from 52 to 20,000 maximum. In other words, all our senses are limited. So, with these limited senses, we naturally are seeing through a very narrow kind of tube or very narrow slit in the total reality there is. Now, as you're evolving, what happens is that that slit opens up more and more and more. So you see more and more of that reality, and we assume that we see different realities. They're not very different realities, but rather a very extended, broad view of one very large reality.
But here's the catch. You can't already exist on all these levels. You just can't see them. According to Bentov, nature is pulling us upward, whether we realize it or not. Evolution isn't done. It's carrying us from isolated humans into something far greater. And that's just the beginning, because Bentov believed the nervous system itself wasn't just showing us reality, it was hiding most of it. Think about your brain and senses for a second. You see colors, hear sounds, touch surfaces. But what if that's only a sliver of what's really out there? Bentov believed the nervous system works like a radio receiver. It only tunes into certain frequencies. Right now, we're stuck on one channel. Evolution, he said, is simply the process of widening the dial. And he didn't leave it at theory. In the 1970s, he strapped people into a device called the ballistocardiograph, measuring micro vibrations in the body. What he discovered blew him away. During deep meditation, the heartbeat, the breath, even tiny body movements all locked into rhythm, about 7 cycles per second. That's the same frequency as Earth's natural heartbeat, the Schumann resonance. In that state, the body itself becomes an antenna, resonating not just with itself, but with the planet. Here's how his wife Myrtala explained it.
As an engineer, he looked at the body in terms of vibrating systems or oscillators. And in this case, there are 5. The heart-aorta system, the brain itself, a cavity in the brain which is filled with fluid, a ventricle, and then the brain itself, the sensory cortex, and then all this results in an electromagnetic field around the head. So as the heart pumps blood through the aorta, it hits the bifurcation into the legs, and a certain plane wave is reflected up. The next pulse comes down, and the plane wave and the pulse clash, and it creates a disruption in the body. When the harmonious 7 hertz vibration is set up, it seems that the heart and the lungs begin to talk to each other, and they begin to work in harmony, so that a pulse comes down and waits for the reflection to come up, and they both go up together, and then the next pulse comes down, and there is no clash occurring anymore, and the body goes into resonance, triggering the next oscillator, which is the brain. And looking at the head, again from the point of view of engineering, it's a rigid box resting on a resilient column, which is the spine. What happens is, as the body goes up and down, the skull is vibrated, and the brain, which is a gel-like substance, is floating in a fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid, so that each time the body goes up, it's hitting the skull and then goes down, and so up and down it goes, and it creates a plane wave within the brain. The brain has a characteristic called piezoelectric, which means that when it's stimulated mechanically, it develops an electromagnetic field around it, which is this field right here eventually. So this is the second oscillator, which triggers the third. This is the fluid-filled cavity in the brain called ventricle. And due to this regular vibration of 7 cycles, or 7 hertz per second, a standing wave is established in the ventricle, which again creates a very harmonious frequency. And this in turn triggers the sensory cortex. This is a cross-section of the brain, and this is a cross-section of the third ventricle filled with fluid. On top of the third ventricle is a drum-like surface with a bundle of nerve fiber crossing it, which connects the right and left brain hemispheres. And this is very important because as the fluid vibrates harmoniously, it activates this nerve fiber, and it harmonizes the 2 brain hemispheres. And we know that consciousness opens up when the synchronization of the functioning of the 2 hemispheres occurs. And then a certain current is established in the sensory cortex in the lobe of the brain. And as I said before, all this results in an electromagnetic field around the head, so that the head actually becomes an antenna capable of sending out and receiving information.
But that raises the real question. If the nervous system is a radio receiver, then what else are we not tuning into? That question led him straight into his most unsettling idea yet. Bentov said reality itself flickers. It's not continuous. It's like frames of a film reel switching on and off so fast we think it's solid, but it isn't. According to him, everything you see around you, your body, this room, even time itself, is more like a holographic projection. And even other scientists were circling the same idea. In 1971, Carl Pribram at Stanford proposed the holographic brain theory, saying memory isn't stored in one place, but across the whole brain, like a hologram. In 1980, physicist David Bohm doubled down in wholeness and the implicate order, suggesting the universe itself might be one giant hologram. If reality really is a hologram, then ask yourself, who are you? To Bentov, you're not just a single person moving through life. You're a fragment of a much bigger mind. Every thought you've ever had, every choice you've ever made, doesn't just stay with you. It ripples outwards across the entire field, which means you're never alone inside your head. You're already entangled in the mind of the universe.
We are dealing with 2 realities. One is this physical, solid reality that we get blue and black marks from, as he said, when we bump into it. But the information about it is given us by our senses. So that is our subjective reality. And so the two really are giving us the totality of our environment. So what is the objective physical reality? And let us look at the atom. If we magnify the atom and zero in on the electron, and now we think, now we will get the answer to what physical matter is. But if we analyze the electron, all we find is an oscillating electromagnetic field. There's no physical matter as such. So we think, well, maybe the nucleus will give us the answer. And we zero in on the nucleus, and we find that it too is only an electromagnetic oscillating field in the void, because between the nucleus and the electron and outside of them, there is nothing but void. Ben drew an analogy between the electron and the pendulum by looking at the cross-section, as it were, of the atom and comparing it to reciprocal motion. In other words, we see the electron now on this side, now on the other side of the nucleus, which would be the pendulum motion. So what happens in the pendulum? It stops, it moves, stops, and moves again. In other words, it's action and rest, action and rest. If you took an actual pendulum and would swing it and attach a pen to it, and you would draw a piece of paper under it like this, it would describe a sine wave. Here the pendulum moved and stopped, moved and stopped. And reality really are the spaces between the points of rest. We perceive reality when there is motion. And reality is really nothing but oscillating fields in the void. And the reason I can touch this screen and I don't go through the floor is because my atoms, or the electrons of my atoms, are actually repelling the electrons of the floor. But if I would speed up my vibration, then I could very well go through the floor.
According to Bentov, the universe flickers like a hologram. Then we're only here part of the time. So the question is, where are we the rest of the time? In a hologram, every piece carries the whole image. That means you, right now, carry the universe with you. But Bentov believed humanity itself worked the same way. Each of us is like a pixel, small on our own, almost invisible. But when you put us together, we don't just light up. We form the picture, the whole consciousness. But think about what that means. Your thoughts, your actions, even your emotions might be feeding into something far bigger than you can see. The collective human hologram. And if that's true, then humanity isn't just stumbling forward blind. We're evolving as one organism, guided by patterns we barely understand. And that realization leads to a chilling possibility. If all of humanity is part of one mind, who or what is doing the guiding?
And he explained the hologram in terms of 3 pebbles being dropped into a pizza pan filled with water. And you drop these pebbles simultaneously into the water. So it sends out these wavelets that reach every point on the surface of this water. If we take this water now, which resulted in a pattern of wavelets that now clash into one another, all this information about the pebbles, and it's called the interference pattern. In cross-section it would look like that. And if you quick freeze the water and you get a piece of ice like this, which is actually a photograph of all the information about these pebbles. And then you take what is known as coherent light, or light where all the rays are of the same frequency, a laser light, and you shine it through this interference pattern. Lo and behold, you see the 3 pebbles reconstructed 3-dimensionally in space. This is the important part of the hologram, that all the information is contained in this pattern, and every point of this pattern contains that information, because if by mistake you break this piece of ice and you end up with a little sliver of it and you shine the same light through it, you will still get your 3 pebbles. It will actually look something like that. And here, if you shine this coherent light, the 3-dimensional object gets reconstructed. Now, if instead of those 3 pebbles we substitute 3 individuals, because we, like the pebbles, are constantly sending out information about ourselves in a variety of ways. And all these fields are interacting, creating a hologram, an interference pattern, and you could say that human consciousness is one big hologram of information about humanity as a whole. We are one mind, one consciousness.
Imagine smoke rising in a circle, looping around and feeding back into its own center. That, Bentov said, is how the universe breathes. Everything, from galaxies to human bodies, follows this toroidal pattern. Energy flows out, curves around, and comes back in, creating balance. Even your heart produces a toroidal electromagnetic field, measurable with modern instruments. In fact, a 2014 paper in Nature Physics described plasma structures in the lab forming stable toroidal patterns, the same shape Bentov said was written into the universe itself. But he didn't just mean this as a shape in space. He meant it as a cycle of consciousness. The universe expands, contracts, and learns from itself. Every birth, every death, every flicker of human experience, all part of this endless toroidal flow.
This would be the structure then. This is the core of the structure, which is called torus, T-O-R-U-S, a melon-like structure. And matter emerges from the center in the same sequence as we saw before, condensing from light radiation, from photons to stable particles and so on. Then it expands, and visualize this as a 3-dimensional form, goes around and gets pulled back in upon itself into the black hole. This is a white hole and a black hole back to back. This is the gravitational collapse as galaxies are pulled in to the black hole and then re-emerge as energy again on another round to go around and around again. And each time matter goes around, it gets refined. Its consciousness is on the next rung of the spiral. Remember that every speck of matter on the surface of this torus is sending out information about itself. Our galaxy does, and so does a galaxy and many other galaxies which have gone ahead of us, so that the information that is being sent out gets interwoven into one web of information about the entire structure. This is the information that one can tap in those higher states of consciousness and in fact enter the knowledge that's available about the entire structure, because we are a part of this hologram, that little sliver that still retains some of that information, and by tuning into the totality of the hologram, we can have the information about every part of it, and that's exactly what Ben did.
Now here's where it gets strange. Bentov claimed that death is less like falling into darkness and more like waking up from a dream. In his view, the soul sheds the body the way a diver sheds a wetsuit. Not destroyed, just stepping into another environment. A 2014 resuscitation study on near-death experiences found that many patients reported vivid perceptions, even when their brain had flatlined. Stories of tunnels, lights, or overwhelming peace. Details that eerily echo Bentov's descriptions years earlier. To him, rebirth wasn't some abstract religious promise. It was a mechanical certainty. Just as water evaporates, condenses, and rains down again, so too does consciousness recycle through the great cosmic system. You've been here before, he argued, and you will be again. But here's the question Bentov never fully answered. If we keep looping through life and death, like sparks in a current, who or what is keeping the cycle running? And this is where Bentov's story takes a turn from mystic philosophy to government files. In the 1980s, the CIA quietly declassified a series of documents known as the Gateway Process.
That is classified as a non-physical reality.
Buried inside those pages were Bentov's models, sketches, and theories, repackaged as tools for training intelligence officers in altered states of consciousness. Think about that for a second. A man dismissed by many as a New Age dreamer had his ideas pulled into the heart of military research. They weren't just reading his books, they were trying to apply them. A 2003 Army intelligence report even cited Bentov's diagrams directly, showing how the brain could act like an antenna tuned to dimensions beyond the physical. So why would agencies built on secrecy and power be so interested? That's the part that remains unanswered. Maybe they believe Bentov had uncovered something real, a way to stretch human perception beyond ordinary limits. Or maybe they feared that if they didn't explore it, someone else would. Either way, it leaves us with one chilling thought. If reality is a hologram and our minds are the receivers, then the truth about what we are capable of might already be sitting in a locked government file. The CIA thought Bentov's work was worth studying. Scientists keep circling back to the same patterns. And you're left with the same question Bentov whispered decades ago. If your nervous system is only showing you a fraction of reality, then what are you not seeing right now?